Warning, we are not your attorneys. Please, don't take anything we say as legal advice. I'm Jeff.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Derek.
And you are listening to the Not So Grand Jury,
which is now sponsored by Morwa P. LLC. Hey everyone, Derek with the Not So Grand Jury here with a sidebar for you today. So a couple things for your listening pleasure. The first one's relatively quick, which is that we've received some listener feedback that you all would like a little heads up on the next episode so that you can either watch the movie or rewatch the movie, TV show, whatever it is. So when we do drop it, you don't have to wait to listen to the episode, which seems fair. So we're going to try to do that going forward, and hopefully can get our act together to make sure we are giving you the correct information before we drop. So for next week, we can tell you that we're going to be talking about season 1 of The Good Place. And I will say, huge spoiler alert, because for those of you who have not watched The Good Place, we're going to ruin it possibly for you if you were to listen here and then watch it afterwards. So if you have not watched The Good Place or you've watched it and forgot about it, please feel free to try to watch at least season 1 before next week. We are specifically going to talk about Eleanor and Jason's actions in real life and some of the weird and, potentially criminal things that they get involved in. So I think it's a fun conversation, and I think you'll enjoy that one. So be on the lookout for that. And second, about a month and a half ago, we released an episode with special guest Wes Rist to talk about Captain America Civil War. And we received some listener feedback. So we recorded a sidebar where we brought Wes back, and we had about a 20-minute conversation to respond to some of our listener comments, questions, so on and so forth. Apologies for the little delay in getting it out. Also, a slight apologies on the relatively poor audio quality. We unfortunately had to revert to plan B due to an issue with some of the audio. So we apologize that it's a little off, but it's not so bad. So I give to you a brief sidebar where we respond to listener feedback on Captain America Civil War. And we look forward to presenting next week with The Good Place. And as always, please give us your feedback. Please give us comments. Please give us suggestions on new things to watch. We've listened to many of you, especially when it came to Suits and a few other things. And for those of you who don't think we're paying attention, we are. There's a few things in the works that it directly comes from some of our listeners' suggestions. So as always, thank you for listening and enjoy the brief sidebar with Wes.
Hi, everyone. We have decided to put together a quick sidebar. You've got everybody. You've got the 3 main members here, and we've got Wes back. Hi again, Wes. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
We've got some commentary to discuss, which is always a fun time. Wes, congratulations. You are the first guest host to have multiple comments. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but we're going to respond to them either way. The first one, and I know you took this on hard, was the sort of thing with Bucky. So I'm gonna probably defer directly to you on this because you had some opinions on this. We got a comment on Spotify from Rula, who had previously commented on our X-Files episode.
Oh, okay.
Today. So we have another person who likes to jump in again. I like that. The comment is, you say there's a slam dunk case against Bucky for 50 years of assassinations. Do you have any thoughts of the defense of literal brainwashing, leaving him unable to disobey orders to kill? I realize the closest to real life would be some variation on diminished capacity, but ...
Yeah, and this is a good point. It does matter the context that we brought this up in, which was the question about, does Bucky get a lawyer for the immediate detention before being sent to the raft? So that's a very different question than like a trial where you're actually determining criminal guilt for Bucky, at which, yes. The question of, is Bucky a well-known international fugitive with 50 years of assassinations behind him? And is a judge going to say, no, 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 you don't get to extradite him to wherever the heck you want to because of this? I think that's a more difficult hurdle to clear. And that was in the context of they made the joke about lawyer, haha, funny. You don't get that. But no, my point was no, they absolutely would give him a lawyer. But they would do the second part of that is they would do the mental health review. Bucky's mental capacity, because he's been brainwashed X number of times, and who knows what the neural wiring of his head looks like now, might very well come up in that. But in the Marvel movies, there is never any evidence that Bucky has had any kind of mental issues from all the brainwashing outside of when they're actually reciting the trigger words. Although nobody in the Marvel movies seems to have PTSD until we hit the most recent Thunderbolts movie.
Well,
didn't he have a therapist in
the show? He
TV
does.
show. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know that was about the trauma of being brainwashed multiple times. It appeared to be more about he's in a different time and he's learning to adjust. So
I honestly don't really remember. I watched that show once and never thought about it again until now.
In Iron Man 3, Tony is explicitly dealing with PTSD.
No, good point. Very good point.
Yeah,
Yes.
he has it several times.
Jeff. I forgot about that. Yeah, good call, Jeff.
I feel like we could probably find some other examples, but yeah, that's a good point that a guy who's been brainwashed, for 50 years seems to be stable enough to be a senator.
Yeah.
But I think the question here is, did he have the capacity to know right from wrong when he committed the acts?
Yeah, and I think there is a valid question of long term, assuming there is some kind of legal process. We're not sure about that. The raft is clearly a parallel for Guantanamo. They are just throwing people there and forgetting about them. But assuming that there is some kind of legal process, any kind of defense lawyer would be exploring this. I don't know enough about criminal law at the federal. I'm assuming this would be U.S. federal criminal law in this context. It might not be. It could be some other jurisdictions. There have got to be some questions about mental capacity, responsibility. That's a different legal question from the very real ethical one of Bucky may not have been responsible, but the person that the body that Bucky inhabits still killed Tony Stark's parents. Tony doesn't get over his anger just because he knows that Bucky was brainwashed into doing it.
I love that. I have no idea what you talk about most of the time because I don't understand all the movies, but I love all of that. Cool. The second comment, this is one that was a text message directly as fan mail to our Buzzsprout site. Viewer. Yeah.
I was not aware people could text our.
It is.
That's interesting. Okay.
It is on every single one of our episodes. You may.
Oh, that's right. It is. I forgot.
Technology.
We recorded that a year ago. So.
Guys, Jeff is the most capable. Remember that. Okay.
I did text immediately upon listening to that episode. I didn't even wait for the episode to end. I texted the friend thread and it was it pleases me very much to know that Jeff is the most capable.
And Jeff is never going to live that down because literally every episode we have a comment on how Jeff's the most capable when he does something real stupid.
Yeah. And it's either me making a comment, or.
Yeah.
But anyway, we have actually a very good comment from one of our listeners from Oregon. Here's the full comment. Okay, wait though. RE, how long it takes to ratify treaty is about 25 minutes or so, presumably into our episode. Sometimes things can move very fast given events. For example, the Outer Space Treaty provisions were debated in the UN General Assembly in December 1966, and the treaty itself drafted and opened for signatures in January 1967. Now, it didn't enter into force until October 1967. But if, for example, a state suffered extreme damage from something like superpowered individuals, the UN might also move quite quickly given the need and perhaps expedite the effective date. No, question mark. I'm going to send this over to you, Wes, in a second, but I do want to make one point because I went back through the transcript of this episode and just to confirm. There is some confusion as to whether it was signed or ratified in Vienna. I just want to throw that out there, that I think the first statement is that 117 countries are coming to ratify. And then, which is also interesting because it says the UN meets to ratify. That's not how that works. The UN doesn't, like, the ratification can happen sort of on its own accord, right? Wes, like, the countries will ratify on their own. They don't need to meet to ratify.
Correct. There can be an event to acknowledge, recognize, celebrate, whatever, but you don't have to. It's just depositing the instruments with the UN.
Correct. So originally in the episode, they mentioned that the UN meets in Vienna to ratify the accords, which doesn't really make sense. Then at another point, they say, I'm off to Vienna for the signing of the accords, which is another thing. And then the news anchor who's reporting on it says 117 countries have come together to ratify the accords. So we're all a little confused what the heck happened in Vienna. With that being said, and let's just put it this way, there's no way they could have ratified it that quickly. I'm just going to throw that out there. That is just nearly impossible given the timing. Maybe sign. I don't know what approve means in the Marvel universe, because we do know that there are certain things that don't exist in the real world. But I guess theoretically they could have signed quickly, but there was no way it would have been ratified and come into force that quickly unless the number of countries required to like trigger it was real low. And that I think would be a little weird. So I'm going to turn this over to Wes or actually Jeff seems like he wants to comment first, then we'll go to Wes.
So the comment specifically discusses the space treaty.
The Outer Space Treaty, yeah.
Yes, the Outer Space Treaty. I pulled it up here just to confirm. That's a 3-page document, roughly.
Yeah.
The Sokovia Accords that we see are a book, 100 pages, which leads me
probably
to...
realistic. Probably realistically how it would be if you were going to have, superpowered individuals. You would have a long document going. Sorry.
And especially since a lot of treaties like this, you're presented with multiple language versions of the same one all in one document as authoritative versions. But
it is worth noting that highly specialized treaties tend to be longer. Like the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea is over 200 pages long.
Sure.
So the more specialized it is, the bigger it tends to be.
Yeah. And something that we didn't really touch on in the episode at all is that it seems to have been negotiated and drafted in secret. At least the people who were subject to it were unaware that it was being drafted.
A great point, Jeff. But that does go back to the point that individuals are not the subjects of international law. States clearly were involved in negotiating this. And so the states that were involved had all the proper notice. If the back to that whole thing of like, is Captain America, is the Falcon, are they agents of the United States government, acting
Sure.
internationally? If they chose not to involve them in that, that's, their choice. There's no requirement that they do so. And obviously there are strong political reasons that they might choose not to. I do want to address the timing that this person raised, because while, yes, it is true that they debated this in the 1966 General Assembly and then it went to signature in 1967, it went back to 1965 where the first round of treaties by Russia and America, they submitted competing treaty versions on this. So it was all the way back then. And the State Department, I don't know how long the Russian Foreign Ministry had been working on it, but the State Department had spent, I don't know exactly the amount of time, but a significant amount of time working on this. So it wasn't like we just rolled up through it together in December at the UN and then January the next year we voted on it. There was a long formulation process. It is, I think, worth flagging. One of the godmothers of international law is Eileen Galloway, who rarely gets name checked, but she was the mother of space law. She held a position in the State Department that was not officially responsible for doing all of this kind of work, but she is the reason that the United States participated in all of this, developed all of this. There's an annual symposium now in DC called the Eileen Galloway Symposium, because she is the woman who shepherded these things through. And so she was in many ways responsible for actually pushing this through the entire UN system and for building in some of the flexibilities in the Outer Space Treaty. Sorry, that's just me geeking out about the Outer Space Treaty and how cool it is. But to the commenter's point, yes, the actual formal time frame was December 66, January 67. The actual length of time spent developing those treaties, roughly 3 years, from somewhere in 55 to 67 before it was open for signature. And then the signatures and ratifications came in, which, different time frame. So.
And I'll point out the commenter had no reason to know this, but Wes, you, in addition to being formerly in the U.S. government and judging with Derek and I an international law moot court competition, you also judge a space law moot court competition, do you not?
That is quite wonderful. Has a very small participation thing, but yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, and
I was also a student coach for it too. I coached several teams through it. It's called the Manfred Lachs Space Law Moot Court Competition, named after a former ICJ judge.
I like that point because unfortunately our commenter picked one other thing that Wes knows a lot about, so it was kind of he was able to respond to that.
And that's very funny.
There are examples out there of treaties being ratified quickly. Like, as I recall, the 2015 Paris Agreement was ratified quickly, but again, 5 years of negotiations to get to that point, then the ratification happened. So, like, there are certainly and like a couple treaties that are really tiny, right? Like, that's the thing with the Outer Space Treaty. It's had 4 or 5 new versions of it to like that added on top of it because of basically it was a baseline.
There are later versions that expand on what is covered, the telecommunications, insurance and liability, etc. But yes, it is broad general principles of outer space law. And really minor aside, but my favorite story about this kind of work is the most important decision when it comes to human technology development is the decision the State Department did not make, which was when Russia launched Sputnik and Sputnik starts orbiting, it's going to orbit America. And the question became really important really quickly. How far up does sovereignty go? Sovereignty is an invisible line drawn on a map that you say this is ours. How far up does that line go? And there was a debate within the State Department on, do we assert the sovereignty of the United States and claim that there is a violation of that sovereignty when Sputnik goes overhead? And the decision not to assert that right of sovereignty for outer space entities changed the nature of how we view space. Like, if they had asserted, no, Sputnik violated our sovereignty, we'd be living in an entirely different world.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Wes, I owe you an apology. My phone went off there for a second. I was not able to edit it out of this audio before you heard it. So
that's funny.
Professionalism at its top.
Listener, the first feedback I gave to the new podcast repeatedly was because I know Jeff, he's a friend. I know what his text message alert sounds like going off.
So does the listener.
Jeff, turn off your phone. Yeah, so does everyone else that listens to the podcast.
Any listener now probably knows what Jeff's ringtones are.
Yeah. So very, very repeatedly for these episodes, I would just text in the group thread, Jeff, turn off your phone.
And I think he's purposely not done that now, just so it adds to the allure.
I will cherish it always.
I love that. Well, while we have you, Wes, because rarely do we have our guest host back on to sort of have commentary, you have listened to the episode?
I did.
Do you have any, clarifications, amendments, updates that you want to make? We did take out a very big part that we plan to use later on that you may not have remembered. So there, at some point, you made a very strong pitch on one issue that we decided to edit out because it was, once, for length, but 2, there was a very good 3 minutes that we have just pulled out and we plan to use for a future sidebar that you'll be excited to hear.
Oh, I don't remember what that was.
That's what I was hoping you were going to say. So I was hoping
there was a month between recording and when it came out, and it came out, a week ago? I barely remember what I did a week ago.
So it sounds like you did.
I enjoyed listening to it again. I don't usually like listening to my own voice. That whole it sounds much different when you listen to it through headphones thing. But it was a fun conversation, and I enjoyed thinking back on the fun conversation that night. So, and I will happily geek out about international law and nerdy shit with you guys again.
Oh, we know. And you will.
You will. We will. And maybe this next time Derek will understand half of what we're talking about. So
we can pick a non-Marvel thing, Derek. Pick a sci-fi property that you watch.
Or I'll just watch all 40 of them and get back caught up.
The next thing he watched was the Black Widow movie. Like, he's picking weird ones to watch.
No, I had already watched that, Mike.
He had already watched
and then he watched it again.
Why? Because it was right in order. Why wouldn't you watch it? It's the next. It's right then. It keeps going. Mike,
I don't think it is the next one.
I live rent free in Mike's brain because of my stupid movie choice decisions, and I'm fine with that. All right, good times. Thank you, Wes. Thank you, listeners. Obviously, keep giving us commentary, and we'll keep responding to it.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good talking to you, Wes.
The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by Morwa P. LLC.
The opinions expressed in the Not So Grand Jury are those of the hosts themselves and not of their respective employers.
The theme music for the Not So Grand Jury is from Gustav Holst's Jupiter and is in the public domain.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you want to suggest future movies, or even if you want to offer corrections, you can email us at notsograndjury@gmail.com or message us on any of our social media accounts.
The Not So Grand Jury is copyright 2025, all rights reserved.